I fortunately always had a great workroom behind me, people who knew what they were doing. And I didn't even sketch. I always had to have a sketch artist to sketch for me. In those days, I would do a quick pencil sketch and give it to the workroom, tell them what I wanted. But it was the cutters and the fitters who really were the craftsmen and the technicians. I picked out the fabrics and did all of that. But as far as the technical end, somebody else took care of all that for me, and I learned to do it through them. But I was covered. My butt was covered by all the people who really knew what they were doing. And early on in my career, I met a great guy by the name of Ray Aguion who started working at NBC. And once again, he was so willing to share his talent with me. He helped me greatly, and whatever I didn't know, I could ask Ray to do. Ray is the one who designed the Judy Garland show at CBS in those days. And so I was fortunate to always have people around me who helped me. A weekly show, on a Thursday or a Friday, you would have a production meeting for the next week's show. But at the same time, you were working on that show. So you had from that moment on until the following Thursday or Friday when you taped to get it done. So I loved doing Friday shows because it meant over the weekend you could kind of get everything into work since started. So you worked 7 days a week. And Monday morning you would come in and put the sketches into work. You very seldom got to show anybody the sketches. You would talk about it in the production meetings, but uh, there was no time to show sketches. You just went ahead and did it. Everybody did their own job, and the producers trusted you that you knew what you were doing, and you did it. If you had a star coming in, of course, you would have to show them the sketch of what they were going to wear, and before you put it into work. Sometimes you didn't. Sometimes you had enough chutzpah to go ahead and put it into work, thinking that it would be okay, and sometimes it was. Sometimes you had to make changes.
When you presented ideas, you mentioned you did some sketching and then there was a team of technicians,
Yeah.
or you chose fabric or swatches. How did you make those choices and who did you present them to? Who had to kind of approve them?
Theoretically, you would go to a producer to have them approved, but quite often there wasn't any time, so you went directly to the star if you were doing something for a star. I remember when I was doing the Andy Williams show, I had Tallulah Bankhead on. It was one of the few television appearances she had made, and I sent her off a group of sketches. And then she called me and she said, "Darling, I love your sketches, but there's a problem." I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "Well, I have a perfect figure and you haven't accommodated it." I said, "Well, tell me what you mean." She said, "Well, I'm 36, 36, 36. Don't give me a waistline." So then I quickly sent her off another group of sketches that there was no waistline, and she loved everything. So she was terrific to work with. She was a wild woman. We were doing an Andy Williams show at the time, and she decided she needed the B12 shot, and we were in rehearsal hall, and they brought the nurse in, and Andy was quite frightened of her anyway. She was bigger than life, and we stopped rehearsals, and she dropped trousers and bent over, and the nurse gave her a shot, and everybody was kind of shaking, and pulled up her trousers and went on with the rehearsal. It meant nothing to her, but everybody else was quite shaken by the experience. In the early days, white was a bugaboo. That was the only real bugaboo. You were not allowed to use white. You had to tech it all down to dirty it down to something that would work on camera. And you learned as you went along what in black and white, because we worked in black and white, you knew what would photograph a certain way. Reds, for instance, would always go a gray. So as exciting as it looked to you in person, it was going to be that kind of muddy gray on camera, and you just had to figure out what was going to give you contrast and what was going to work in black and white. And then when color first came in, you couldn't do very intense colors because it bled. It would be so intense that it wouldn't work on camera. So it was just a trial and error method. You always knew about strobing. You couldn't use small stripes or next to each other or checks because they would jump and strobe on camera, so you avoided things like that. And it just was a matter of, I'm sure it was instinct on my part anyway, about what I would use. I would try to stay as safe as possible and not run into those areas that I thought would give them trouble. I used a lot of blue in those days, different shades of blue, and I used a little bit of everything. I just avoided, uh, I guess, white is the only thing and great contrast. You didn't do great contrast. You didn't use a very light color with a dark color. But I don't remember having any specific problems with lighting. If you're designing for a star, the star you take into consideration first, what's going to look good on her. If you're designing for a specific number, that kind of comes out of your head, unless a producer said, I want to do a country western number, I want to do, when on the old Andy Williams show, Bob Finkel was the producer, and he used to say, this week we're going on a picnic and we'll be in Texas. And, he would give you a location and kind of define it for you so you had the boundaries to work within. And it depends on what information you're given. Otherwise, it kind of comes out of what hits you at the moment. But you always, for the star, you want to make sure that she looks good no matter what period you're doing. If you cheat the period and cheat everything else, you're making her look good, or him.